Hi, everybody. So happy to be back with you all. I'm excited for today's conversation. Hello, I am Leslie Godet. I'm one of your co hosts. I'm a mindset and emotional awareness coach for women. I've shortened it to mindset and EQ because it won't fit the whole box, but that's okay. I work with highly motivated female entrepreneurs who have strong CEO skills but need more self care incorporated into their life and business to support their overall emotional and physical well-being. Andy.
Hello, everybody. I love your introduction every time you say it. It just makes me giggle, makes me
Well,
smile.
I've changed it a little bit, but it's just because I've shortened it to just get to the point?
Well, and it's never the same words every time you say it. It's always unique, and I like that. It's generally the same thing, but yeah, I
Kinda.
like that. I like that. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy. I'm the unconditional coach. I'm the other half of your co-hosts, um, and I help people who get stuck in the dirt of life. I help them get out of whatever sticks them, get out of the muck, get out of the corruption, the grossness that life can become, and get back into the joy and happiness, the love, the fulfillment that we can find if we really do what we want out of life. And I usually do so through helping people figure out boundaries. That's my secret sauce, my secret recipe is how I do that. So,
Yeah.
welcome to this discussion.
Yeah.
So, why don't you introduce our discussion of the day?
Yeah. So we decided we're going to go a little bit different in how we come to you each week, at least for now. We're going to be
Hmm.
starting to talk a little bit more about problems and symptoms because I think a lot of the time we think a problem a symptom is a problem when actually it's a symptom and there's a deeper level problem. And sometimes we think the problem is let's just say we think the problem is something, for example, being tired, but the actual that's really actually a symptom and the problem is
Right,
something else.
right.
And I don't know if I said that the way I wanted to, but we're going to be talking about problems versus symptoms. We're going to be bringing you a topic each week and then get into the discussion. And so today is interesting because, well, I think a lot of women are probably going to be paying close attention to this one. And I think it really just boils down to that we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
We really do speak the same language. We were just not using the same words. And
Yes.
so we might think someone isn't listening or isn't prioritizing our needs or wants. And that could be the truth, but it could just because we're not understanding how it's coming across because they're telling us they are, but we're just not seeing it with their actions because we don't speak that,
Right,
if that makes
right.
sense. So I'm
That's
excited for
exactly true.
today.
That's exactly true. And it's very much about um it's very much about, like you said, we do speak the same language. We even use the same words a lot of the time. Just what one person thinks those words mean is different than what the other person thinks those words mean.
Mm-hmm.
And and uh, to go back to the introduction, like you said, we're focusing now on symptoms and problems, or problems and symptoms. Like you said, a lot of the time people come to a problem, and they're like, my husband this, or my boss that, or my wife this, or my kids that. And what they think is the problem is the circumstance or the scenario or the thing that's happening. And the issue with that is that if they solve that particular scenario, that problem will just come up in a different direction, right? So you get your husband to listen to you on this issue, but he doesn't listen to you on 10 other issues. Well, the problem isn't that he's not listening to you on that particular issue. It's that is that there's some sort of a breakdown in communication. With this one specifically, where and I've heard this, I've heard a lot of women say it too. A lot of my female clients, I've got both male and female clients, and a lot of my female clients have said, "So why doesn't he listen to me? Why doesn't he prioritize what I want? Why doesn't he Why doesn't he put any emphasis on what I want? Why does he always do what he wants first and ignore what I want? And I think it does come down to, is that the actual problem, or is there something deeper? And I like this direction that we're taking about examining things from the problem or the symptom perspective, because I think a lot of the times a lot of people try and solve that particular scenario when they don't realize that what's causing it is something deeper. And if they solve the something deeper, they would actually probably solve 5 or 10 or 15 different problems that are happening in their lives. In this case, when he doesn't prioritize what I want, when my husband, my boyfriend, my boss doesn't prioritize what I want and does what he wants first, or more importantly, or puts more focus on what he wants versus what I want, oftentimes the problem isn't that he doesn't want to do what you like. It's that he doesn't understand how important it is to you, or he doesn't understand, or he doesn't know how to hear your heart, your wishes. He just hears a to-do list. And oftentimes when a person hears a to-do list, they feel that they're left to their own devices to decide the priorities of that list. So if we give our partner a to-do list, chances are he's also got items he's adding to that to-do list, and then he's got to prioritize which things come first. So unless we're able to properly communicate our priority, how important this is to us. And I say properly communicate because sometimes it isn't saying, well, this is very important to me, because he won't hear that sometimes. Sometimes he does. So what is the problem? Is the problem really that he doesn't listen to me? That he doesn't care what I want? That he doesn't even value what I value? Is that the problem? Is it that he has different values than I have? Is it that we don't know how to communicate? Like, what is the deeper problem here? Is it simply that I give him a to-do list? A lot of husbands, a lot of boyfriends talk about their honey-do list. Honey, do this. Honey, do that. Honey, do this. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, from the man's perspective, we don't understand how important this is to her. And sometimes, even when they do understand how important it is to her, the thing that doesn't usually happen is they don't sit down and discuss the priorities together. Mm-hmm. They don't sit down and the two of you, or 3 or 4, depending on how many people are in the discussion, sit down and discuss which things come first on the priority list. If you as the wife have a certain priority on things, and me as the husband has certain priority on things, who decides which goes first? Right? Do we have any discussion about who decides that? Should there be one person who decides it? Should it be the wife? Should it be the husband? And of course, each of us thinks that our priorities should come first. So when we just give our husband or our boyfriends a list, and we leave it to him to decide the priority, or we tell him how important it is, but we don't listen to the things that he finds important, then we're only having part of the conversation. And even if we are having the whole conversation, do we understand how he thinks, how he acts, do we actually listen to what he says about what he thinks, or do we just make some assumptions about what we know, because what he says he thinks is a lie, which is often the case. We have our own assumptions about how the other person acts based on their actions, not based on their words. So again, we make a bunch of assumptions, and it's all down to communication. It's all down to assumptions. It's all down to values. So what is the deeper problem? Mm-hmm. So yeah, what do you think the deeper problem is when that comes up?
Yeah. So first, I just want to say it's not necessarily that we're just talking about women having to listen to the man's perspective, because this really falls on the guys too. Like, you guys are not being let off the hook. Okay.
Right.
It's not about you just deciding, well, she needs to learn to listen to what my thoughts and my needs and my feelings are when it comes to her asking me to do something, because I want, it really is a two-way street. that is the way communication is. It's a give and take. For me, I think, one of the things that's been, I believe, for me, a constant, not, I don't know if it would be the word battle, but it's just something that's come up more often than not, which is having to remind my husband that I want him to do a certain task. Um, and I've had to remind him multiple times over sometimes a weeks of asking him to do something, where on the flip side, when he's asked me to do something, he wants me to do it right now. And so the disconnect to me has been, well, why do you feel that your needs are more important than when I ask you to do something, but you
Right.
expect me to do this, right?
Mhm.
And I've even expressed to you that for me, it's, I don't want to be nagging him to do something. It's just
Right.
not something I feel comfortable. Just like I wouldn't want him nagging me to do something. So
Right.
I just prefer when you ask me to do something, okay. But on the flip side to that, when he's not putting, I start feeling like, why is my ask not important enough for you to do right now or
Right.
within a couple of days? To at least express to me, I'll get to it tomorrow or I'll get to it in a couple of days, and then we can follow up. Why is it that it's left on the woman, in my particular case, how I felt, to keep following up? But then on the flip side, I'm supposed to, from his perspective, immediately do what he's asking. And there's really no answer to that other than it comes down to that conversation that we have.
Yes.
We continue to have these conversations, because that's just how it is. It's not like he's going to remember a conversation and he might just fall back into an old pattern, and I have to be accepting of that could be the possibility, and know that that conversation will come up again. I don't know if there's, for me, the problem of perhaps the problem to me, or I should say the symptom to me, is I'm feeling unheard. I'm feeling, you know, disrespected sometimes when
Hmm.
my ask is not, and feeling uh, low priority.
Yeah.
And so that's my symptom. And the problem is just that it's still me learning to communicate to him, but it's also he's part of the problem, but he's not listening.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't mean that it's on me to teach him how to listen.
Hmm.
It's just still continuously having these conversations. So it's not about like, oh, the woman has to figure out the guy. It's
Right.
That's not what we're talking about, and it's not a man's, a man is not supposed to exactly figure out the woman, but they have to be able to come to some kind of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, an agreement somehow to decide, okay, let's talk about it.
Hmm.
As an example, you were saying, like, if you have something that you want and your wife wants something that she wants, but how do you prioritize that? Who gets to put things in order? Like, what goes first? And I don't really know if there's really an answer to that that's definitive, because one might really be more urgent than the other. Like one might
Exactly.
have a time limit on it than and the other doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think the way to do it is to agree to do it together, not one person always taking the lead, because then the other person might feel like they're not on that high priority list. So that's kind of like my roundabout answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're right. It's not the responsibility of one person, especially not. It's not the responsibility of the woman to teach the man how to communicate. What I try and do in these conversations, and I think we both do too, is we're talking more to whoever's watching this video. Whether it's the man, whether it's the woman, it doesn't matter which one of you is watching the video. Whether it's the boss, whether it's the employee, whether it's the brother or the sister, or it doesn't matter who's watching the video. but it doesn't help us to put the responsibility onto the other person. So if I'm the man watching the video, it doesn't help me to put the responsibility onto my wife. If I'm the wife watching the video, it doesn't help me to put the responsibility onto the husband. If you're watching the video, if you're watching this live or if you're watching this played back, you're the one who's noticed a problem. Therefore, you're the one in the best position to try and solve the problem, whichever part of the party you are, whichever side of the discussion you're on. It's not about which one should solve the problem. It's about you're the one who noticed it. You're the one who's taking the initiative to solve it. If you can get your partner to participate in watching this video with you, then perhaps you could equally take responsibility for solving this problem. However, one of you has decided to watch this video, chances are it isn't both of you watching this video. And if that's the case, then you are the most likely party positioned to try and use the solutions that we suggest. And in this case, whether you're the wife or the husband, if she doesn't feel heard, which is, like you said, usually the case, most wives, most girlfriends who've come to me with this problem, it's because they don't feel heard. They don't feel prioritized. They don't feel like they matter in his daily to-do, like in what he does every day. And if that's the case, then if you are the wife watching this, then there are some ways that you can, open up the conversation to try and help him hear your priority. If you are the husband and your wife is telling you, or your girlfriend is telling you she doesn't feel heard, there are some ways that you can open up the conversation. And because we're not generally talking to both sides, it doesn't always help to tell you that both sides have to take responsibility. I mean, yes, that is the truth. Both sides do have to take responsibility, but you're the one choosing to do something about it until the other person also decides to do something about it. And this is what you experienced, Leslie. You decided to do something about it, and then you helped your husband learn what your priorities were, and then he decided to take some responsibility also. Right? And that's what has happened. That's what generally does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Was that your experience with this?
Yeah. So, and it's just even recently we had a conversation around something, and uh, what I have learned through my own work is how to actually keep myself from responding in the moment because I want to really hear what he has to say. And even if I'm not in agreement with what he has to say, I always let him know that I hear you and I understand what your point of view is and I hear you. Doesn't mean I agree with him, but I let him know that I'm listening. I think one of the things that women mostly, and I'll just put myself in that particular category as far as the timing. There's not always the timing for our conversations that's really taken into consideration because I think as women, when we are in that emotional place, and I think that's where we can learn, that's what I do, I work around emotions, is learning to not allow the emotion to drive the conversation or the timing of the conversation
Right.
because you're not going to get what you want from it. I can just tell you that right now. Just from personal experience, I just know this. When you are driving your conversation from emotion, the all he and it can be vice versa. Whoever is what the drive one with driving the conversation with emotion, the other person, all they hear is the emotion.
Yeah.
That's it. They don't hear what it is that you really are looking for. All they hear is the hurt and the emotion in your voice. That's it. And I think when I learned that, to just, take that time to, as I said, I did a lot of work around this. And so now when we have these conversations, that even the ones that I don't agree with, I can actually keep myself from allowing that emotional place to be the one where I respond from.
Right.
And it's not easy. and I don't always succeed. There has
Mhm.
been times when I've, just allowed myself, but I think it really does make a difference, the timing. And, like, because again, there's when you are coming from that emotional place as well, that could lead to mean perhaps that there is even a deeper level. Like, you have a problem where you think the problem is he doesn't prioritize you, but is there could be a deeper level for you, which is you don't feel loved. That could be a deeper, but then even beyond that is that you might think that you don't deserve to be loved. I mean, there's like layers. We can go
Exactly.
deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And
Yeah.
so you might think the problem is this, but it really could be something even so much deeper than you've even taken the time to unpack. And when you get there, and which you, of course, you've been working with some women lately in this particular area, is the deeper you go, the it becomes clearer that that real problem for that person is closer to them than it is to the other party,
Right.
meaning their feelings are about themselves, whether it's abandonment issues, whether it's the self-love, not loving themselves, not feeling lovable, not feeling like they push people away.
Hmm.
That could all just come from an actual story. Obviously, these are stories they're telling themselves, but it actually comes down to a personal, like, identity that they are embodying. And
Yeah.
that's where you start to really unpack those deeper level problems
Yeah.
that are linking themselves to branching out to all these big emotional symptoms that are going on. And so again, that thing where you say he doesn't prioritize me could really be that you just don't even feel valued, period. And where
Right.
does that come from? Well, that could come from your childhood, because most of the time our stuff comes from growing up, from our
Yep.
experiences.
Yep.
And so you're bringing all that with you and laying it at the foot of your relationship, and you're saying all of these things are true, and it might not even really be true, but it's just because it's struck a nerve.
Yeah.
And now you become that person who says he doesn't prioritize what I want, because he doesn't think I'm important enough. And you start telling these stories. So yeah, I went off on a little bit because I get really super passionate about stuff like this. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
No, and you had a lot to say there, because um, that those stories ring true, and it is usually about something deeper, which is kind of the point of this new trend we're leaning into here. Is this really the problem, or is there something deeper?
Mm-hmm.
And that is, like, that's what you went off on. There is something deeper most of the time. So figure out what that is. And what I want to do is I want to take what you said, and I want to talk about it from the man's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, when our partners don't feel like we're prioritizing what they want, um, either A, we are, and they've got some stuff going on. That's what you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Or B, we think we are, but we don't know how to prioritize their stuff. Or we don't don't we don't know how to prioritize. We know we're not prioritizing their stuff over ours. We know we're doing our stuff first, but we don't know how to put importance on theirs. Or C, maybe it is because we don't understand and don't know how to understand, don't know how to hear them when they say this is important to me. When they say when my wife or my girlfriend or my partner says this is a really big deal, this has to be done by the end of today or by the end of the week or by this time, because of whatever scenario makes it time sensitive. You know, um, there could be lots of things in the way for us guys that are stopping us from hearing that are stopping us from acting on that are
Mm-hmm.
stopping us from really being able to respond to that. And even sometimes, if we do manage to have the conversation, let's say that she does get over whatever's gotten in her way, and she manages to have the conversation, and we decide together that this is the priority, and okay, well, this comes first and this comes second and this comes third, and maybe my thing comes first or maybe my thing comes second, but it doesn't really matter. But we sit down together and we have a discussion, and yet I still don't follow through with what we decided in the discussion. Oftentimes the guy has just as much likelihood of having crap in the way from his childhood or from previous experiences as the woman does. I mean, we guys are just as messed up as the women are, oftentimes more so, because what I've noticed is that growing up, guys are given less tools to deal with their emotions than girls are. So oftentimes we're more messed up. We've made more made up more stories about worthiness and about being, we have to be this kind of guy to be worthy, and I'm never that kind of guy, or I have to do this to qualify as being a man, and I don't do those things, and I'm never going to be a man enough, and I'm never going to be this enough, and I'm never going to be that enough. Oftentimes us guys have more of those stories than ladies do. And that is because we haven't been given these tools. So from the man's perspective, it's just as hard for us to admit that we might be the problem, sometimes harder. So I'm here to tell you, if you're the guy and you're listening to this video, if you're listening to this with your partner or on your own, if any of this resonates with you, check yourself. Check what's going on with you. Check the stories you're telling yourself. And ask yourself, do I believe I'm worthy of this? Do I believe I'm good enough? Do I believe I'm man enough? Do I believe she thinks I'm man enough? Do I believe she thinks I measure up? Because all of those are stories that we tell ourselves, usually from previous experiences, often, like you said, in childhood. So not always. Sometimes it's from previous relationships, but usually it's from something that has nothing to do with this scenario. And even in those cases when it does have something to do with this relationship, it's from something from years ago in this relationship. It's not something current. So check yourself, because we do create problems by acting on old issues that aren't current. And we don't address those issues. And especially us guys are resistant to addressing those issues. And before I move on, there's one other scenario I want to discuss too, because there's lots of guys who are emotionally intelligent. There are lots of guys who, like more and more guys, have been getting in touch with their emotions and in touch with their self and in touch with what's going on. So a lot of the guys who have been doing a lot of this work, as I've been doing, we get stuck in a different rut. We're like, yeah, I'm already aware of this stuff. I already know what my problems are. This is clearly her problem, because I already know what my problems are. But that's just another version of the same thing. Because we have worked out some of our stuff, we think we got no stuff left, or we think we know what our problems are, and we get stuck in this idea that if it isn't one of the problems that I already know about, it must be her problem. And again, I'm going to ask you to check yourself. If there's any possible way that you could improve the situation, you have a responsibility to do so. Because if you don't, why are you in the relationship? If you're not willing to put in the work to improve the relationship, why are you in it in the first place? And this goes for both of you. If you're going to blame the other party, why are you there? Right?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that word work into it, right? Because we've talked about work. We talked about that relationships are work. And I think that is where people don't like to, why people are maybe, I think one of the things that they might be staying shy of getting married or committing because of work. Like they have to put work into it. When they hear the word work, it becomes less of a joyful situation because of the wording. But for lack of a better term, that's it. That's what you've got. And that just means putting effort into the relationships, not like work where you're the only one and you're the only one doing anything and trying to keep the relationship alive. It's just both sides putting the effort in. But I really liked what you were talking about from the male perspective. One of the things I think for myself, just from my experience with my husband, and just listening to, you know, a couple stories, listening to his oldest and youngest sisters. They both had. I at one point I remember expressing how my husband was. They called him selfish, because he would get what he wanted, because he went after what he wanted. He would ask, and he's even like had some. Uh, he's had some reflection on some of the things when he was growing up. I don't necessarily think that he was intentionally being selfish. I think when you are one of five, you are just like survival and the, you know, it's survival of the fittest, right? You know, in the animal kingdom, you know, you're
Yeah.
trying to make your place in the world. You're trying to like get your positioning,
Yeah.
and so I think that could be part of it. It could come from that uh, upbringing where, you know, you grew up and you were fighting for not necessarily fighting for attention, but because maybe you grew up in a large family. You know, some friends of mine were one of 13, you know, and so maybe you did have to, you know, be more assertive and aggressive in positioning yourself so that you would be seen and noticed and all of that. So maybe that's where it could come from, that for yourself, if that's where maybe someone has said this to you, where they don't feel like you prioritize their needs and wants. And this goes for the ladies and the men, not just one side.
Yeah.
Maybe it is because that was a scenario you were used to having to position yourself to make yourself stand out. And so for you, your needs became very overwhelming for you when you got older, because now you're in a position more of power of like, well, I want this and I want it now. It's mine and I'm now able to, because before I had to wait. So that I was thinking about that, because that was just, you know, one of the scenarios that came up for me as I had discussions with his family members. And again, I'm not saying that that was necessarily the case of him really being selfish, but from their point of view, that is
Right.
exactly it. That was their perspective. That was what they experienced. Him, on the other hand, experienced, when you ask about that same scenario, if he takes the time to reflect on it, I don't know if he would come to the same conclusion, or just saying, "Oh, I never thought that they would think that." That's, you know,
Mhm.
something that he's said. So it really does. It can come from our upbringing. You know, I grew up with brothers, two younger, one older. One of the, you know, and my brothers, one of the things that they would hear would be, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I was very
Right.
outgoing, very assertive. I was good in school. I wasn't doing that to be better than them. That was just my likes. I liked doing the things that I did,
Right.
and they liked doing the things that they did. So it didn't make, I wasn't trying to position myself above them, before them, better than them. But that could be, as an example, if they, I don't believe that's how they are, but maybe they prioritize their needs because they were told to be more like somebody else, because they didn't feel seen or heard, understood, um, you
Right.
know, prioritized. So, I mean, it really can, you going, that's why we were talking about like the root of a problem can be even deeper than what you think it is,
Right.
based on, again, go take a time travel, because really that's where you're going to find most of your answers, but it's getting
Yes.
to the questions. And we like to go deeper with those questions when we work with people. It's, you know, really unpacking it. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly the point. Is I don't think there is one problem that's beneath this solution or this symptom. I think there's a possibility of a number of different problems that could be causing this scenario. And I think that's what we're coming down to is the symptom is he's not prioritizing what I want. If your partner isn't putting the same priority on what you ask him for as he does what he asks for, ask yourself, are you putting priority on his things? And if there's a difference, and even if there's not a difference, is that a problem by itself, or is there other problems? Is there other problems that also show up in kind of the same way? Do you only feel disrespected because he doesn't prioritize what you want? Or do you also feel disrespected, say, maybe in the bedroom, or when you're talking about where you go for dinner, or where you talk about whose place you go for Christmas, or who hosts Christmas, or what we do for Christmas, or other holidays, or when you're just discussing who does what for whose birthdays? Do you feel disrespected in other areas? Do you feel low priority, unloved, unlovable in other areas? Because if you're finding that there's similar feelings coming up in other areas, that's a pretty good and a pretty solid indication that there's something deeper going on. That it isn't about him prioritizing what you want so much as there's deeper feelings going on for one or typically both sides. And again, we can't speak to the person who's not watching this video. We can only speak to the person who is watching this video. So it's up to you to do what you can do, whoever you are, whichever side of the conversation you're on. It's up to you to do the best you can do to solve your side of the equation. You can't solve their side. And the more you try and solve their side, the more you're simply deflecting from your own problems. The more you see the problem as being something they need to solve, the more you're refusing to look at your own version of the problem.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought that up because I've heard this before from other women, and it's like, well, he was good with X, Y, and Z, but just A, B, and C, I could fix that. And it's like, well, do you go out and you buy, unless you're a fixer upper where a house where you want to be, you flip houses. And so the fixer upper for you is your dream home because then you get to deal with it.
Or cars.
Or
People do
cars,
that with
even.
Cars, that too.
That's one thing. But when it comes to people, you're trying to fix or change someone. You're looking at years, trying to unpack years of experience of doubling down on their own stories and their feelings and what they've told themselves as their truth, what they were passed down to them from their generation before them, or even cultural things. I mean, there's a lot that if you're trying to fix that. So if you're trying to fix that he doesn't prioritize what I want, that person based around that, you're going to run into a wall. But if you can at least look at, okay, like, how am I, like, asking yourself the question, like, how am I expressing my need? Is it, I'm saying, can you take the garbage out? And then you go and you do something else. Or are you saying, can you take the garbage out now? And then you go and do something else. Well, still, how about, can you take the garbage out now because they're going to be picking it up in like probably half an hour, as an example.
Yeah.
So, that becomes more clear to the person of the urgency, and they understand that.
Yeah.
So,
or can you take the garbage before you go to work? That would be great. Exactly. So I'm not sitting with it all day.
Learning how to do that. Or would you mind, I don't know, there's something that I need you to do for me based around a computer thing. I need your help to upload something. If you don't give a time limit, the person might not think that it is a priority, where they might say, hey, I need your help on this because X, Y, and Z, it has to be done by A, B, and C. And there's an actual plan and a time on it. It doesn't mean that their thing is more important than yours. It just means that they've given you an outline with an actual, like, this needs to be done by this time, whereas you've kind of been vague around your need. And so it's like becoming more clear in helping him to see how does this feel for you as a priority? Is it really a priority? Because if it's not, and then you're just setting yourself up to get your feelings hurt if he or she doesn't immediately respond by doing it.
Right.
Or can you actually give more details of, a little bit of urgency? But I'm not saying like it's life or death. I'm saying like, hey, listen, I need you to call so-and-so by this date because I really need to know if they are going to come for dinner or something. Maybe you are making dinner plans for friends. not
Yeah.
saying, can you call so and so and see if they're coming for dinner? And
Right.
then there's no, well, when are they coming for dinner? Like, you
Right.
want to give more details. And the reason why we're saying being more detail oriented is because then you're really like painting a picture of this thing that you
Yeah.
it means something to you,
Yeah.
and allowing it to then become something that could mean something to the person you are asking,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's bringing them into the feeling of it being important. And they can then, oh, I get it. I see where you're coming from. It's important to you. I understand why it's important and the timing of it. And so, of course, I can do it now. So it's just
Yeah.
learning. And this is stuff that I do. So I'm not like making it up like, oh, on the
Right.
fly. That this is stuff that I've learned over time based on my own experience of having to ask over and over again, because he
Well,
never really fully understood the time of it and the importance of it for me. And when I've learned to do that, it's become easier for me to articulate my need for when I need it done, and the why behind it gives
right.
him, oh, got it. He's a bigger picture guy, So I've
Right.
learned to understand that.
And lots of guys are bigger picture guys, or sometimes it's the woman who's the bigger picture person, and the guy is trying to get through to her what his priorities are, and he's having difficulty. Um, the I like what you said in that giving more detail and giving the why, giving the timing, because a lot of the times, if you'll notice, if you'll look at how he tells you what he wants and how you tell him what you want, look at the differences. Look at the details he gives and the details he doesn't give. Because the ones he doesn't give, he doesn't care about. And if you give him those details, he's not going to care about those. If you say, I'd like you to take the garbage out because it smells, but he doesn't care because he has a crappy sense of smell, that's not going to prioritize for him. But if you say, please take the garbage out before you go to work so I don't have to sit with it all day, now he prioritizes you and your comfort because he cares about you. He doesn't have to know that the comfort comes from a sense of smell because he doesn't care about smell. He's not home all day, and he can't smell it even when he is home. But if you say, please take the garbage out so I don't have to sit with it, or so that I don't have to come home to it when I'm at work, when I come home from work, then he'll understand that he's doing it to be good to you, which is something he does want. So pay attention to how he prioritizes, what details he says to you when he wants something. So he might say, I'm going to wash the car so it's prettier for you when you drive around in it. Oh, well, he clearly cares about your comfort, about your image, about how you look when you're out in public. So when you're asking him for something, reference those kinds of details because they're important to him. Right? Don't pay attention to which details he's asking for. Pay attention to what things he's communicating because that'll help you understand what he's thinking. Same for the guys. If you're asking her to do something for you or asking her to communicate with you in a specific way, pay attention to how she communicates because only one half of communication is asking. And actually that's more like a third. 2/3 of communication is listening to how they communicate, listening to how the other person, because most of the time when we communicate, we do it subconsciously. We don't even know half the habits we use. So if you're observing me and you observe my habits, you're going to pick up stuff even I don't know I'm doing. If I'm observing you, I'll pick up stuff even you don't know you're doing. Right? And if I can observe what you're doing and I pay attention to the details that you provide and I provide you with those same details, now I'm speaking your language instead of you forcing you to speak mine. And you'll more
Yes.
often get what you want when you speak the other person's language.
Absolutely, 100%. It's when you said that is something's come up for me recently, and I started recognizing it more and more. My husband has now created this habit around asking me at the end of the day when he comes home, what I had to eat today, whether, he wants to and I realized there is this underlying, he cares about my overall well-being. He wants to make sure that I'm eating well. So
Right.
he asks me what I'm eating. And this wasn't always the case before. Now he's
Right.
consciously asking me, what did you eat today? And because he wants to make sure.
Right.
And when I don't have good eating habits, he brings that to my attention. He goes, I just want you to take care of you. And the underlying is because I want to be with you. So,
Yes.
when someone is like expressing these things, it comes when you start to really understand someone and you're taking the time to make an effort to really learn their communication, their way of communicating with you, whether it's through body language, words, action, whatever that is.
Mhm.
You start to recognize that there's more to it, and they actually have there's things that they say without saying it.
Yeah.
They're telling
I
you
want to
something without saying it.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
add something to that story too. I used to say the same thing to my ex-wife. What did you eat today? Or what food have you prepared that you're going to eat over the next couple of days? Because she'd like to prepare a few days at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And and she always, or not always, she often assumed that I was asking about what she was eating because I wanted her to be thinner and prettier and all these other things. And no, it's because I wanted her to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted her to be healthy and happy. Because when she ate the things that she had pre-decided she was going to eat, she was in better moods. She carried herself better. She presented better. Her body shape or style didn't change or didn't have to change. Just how she carried herself, how she interacted with myself or the kids or other people, it all changed. It all became more positive and more uplifting. And that's what I was seeking. I wanted to be around a happy wife, a wife who made herself happy by doing the things that she knew would make her happy. So I would ask her about her food, what she'd eaten that day, to see if she was, hungry and grumpy, in which case I should go play video games. Or if she had, had a good set of meals throughout the day, in which case I'd want to be around her as much as I possibly could. To hell with the video games, right? I want to be
Mm-hmm.
around my wife,
Mm-hmm.
which is ultimately what I wanted. And this is where this is again where it comes down to the stories. She told herself that anytime I asked about her health, I was actually subliminally asking about her physical shape, which isn't the
Mm-hmm.
case. And I told myself that every time she ate properly, she was happier. That's the story I told myself. Now, whether that was actually true or not, I don't have the facts anymore because we're not together anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the idea. These are the power of the stories we tell ourselves. So if there's something affecting how you communicate, check that and learn how to communicate the way they do. Because if you can hear what their priorities are, what they want, you can speak to those, and you'll much more likely get what you want.
100%. I so agree with that. And I think and it's funny that you brought that into the picture because, one of the stories, one of the things that I had to learn, and I think it really just comes down to I ultimately gained the biggest gift for myself, which is I look at myself now and I love myself wholly. I don't see,
Beautiful.
I might have gained a few pounds, I'm almost 60 years old. And so I might have gained a few pounds based, and I used to be so obsessed with a certain weight, a certain look. And if anyone commented, whether I went up or down, depending on if I went down, I was, thinking, okay, I'm on the right track. If I went up, then I would feel, I get into my feelings. And so I think, it's so funny. I was thinking about this the other day about how I would view a comment such as my husband would pick me up in a bear hug and he'd go, oh, you're like getting so light. And he'd be kidding around, but that used to be a trigger for me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm fat. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah. And so it's just learning to, not allow just making that assumption that somebody else is thinking something about you. can be, it's hard. It's hard. It really is. But making the effort to actually work on yourself, and I think that's what both you and I decided to do for
Yeah.
ourselves, was
Yeah.
work on ourselves. When we did that, we can approach any relationship now from a much more joyful, grateful, loving place. We're not going to respond with those emotional like attachments to things, but rather allow ourselves to, you know, really think through, you know. And I think that just comes down to putting in, I'm not going to use the word work, but putting in the effort to better
Yeah.
yourself for you. And
Yeah.
that should come first. And nobody should ever, 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 ever. So if you're listening, no one should ever do any self development work based on what someone else is telling you they need from you. It should only be about you, because you will not put in the work 100% if it's for somebody else, because you'll start to resent them. I think it's come from a place of looking at it, what's in it for me? What do I have long term to benefit from doing this for me? And then everything else will become part of that. Like, there's so much benefit of going through a self development journey that is an everyday journey.
Yeah.
You put in the effort every day, but there's so much to gain from that in your relationships, because you become more joyful, you become more grateful, more loving, and in how you approach things. And so that's why I think that self-development really truly is, or self-care, I think it should be at the top of everyone's list for what they would want to achieve,
Yeah.
as part of their everyday. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to bring that in. I really liked what you were saying, because I think, yeah, it just comes down to like, what do we want out of this relationship, and can we look beyond what we experienced in life to, and not allow that to influence our relationships today, so that when we think someone's not prioritizing what we want, can we allow ourselves just to look at the bigger, or maybe the deeper level picture, to
Yeah.
see where it's coming from, just, and doing the inner work,
Yeah.
so that you can say, oh, maybe it's not really, he or she isn't listening to me and not prioritizing. Maybe I just haven't really learned that I don't really listen to me and prioritize me. Maybe I don't think I'm worthy and deserving of being put on the priority list and my
Right.
needs being met like right away. Maybe I don't think I deserve it. And
Right.
that could be where you're coming from. That could be exactly, and that is just a symptom of a bigger problem, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
again, we go deeper, deeper, deeper. You get to that real deep rooted level problem, and you
Yeah.
will figure it out from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you just said, how deep is it? If this problem is isolated and there's no other similar problems, chances are this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just solve it, have a discussion, maybe a few discussions to solve it over time, but it'll go away. Chances are, though, if this is a problem, there are other similar problems you're experiencing in your life and in your relationship, and likely in several relationships with other people as well. In which case, there's a deeper problem going on, a deeper
Mm-hmm.
problem inside of you. And if that's the case, then discover that, explore that on your own if you're capable, or get help. A therapist, or oftentimes even just a life coach. Even we can. Oftentimes the problems aren't traumatic, or they're not psychological at the core. They're simply life problems, or they're simply stories that we've told ourselves, or they're simply habits that we've created, and we can help with that. Like, get some help if you need to. Examine it by yourself if you can, or get some help, um, because if you can get to the root of the problem, chances are you'll solve several different symptoms. And if you can solve several symptoms with one stroke, why wouldn't you do that? Right? And the other part of that too is, when you're looking for the solution, if you look for the solution for the symptom, you're not going to solve the problem. because you might stop the bleeding, but the cut is still there. The wound is still there. It still could get infected. It still
Mhm.
could open up and re-wound. Just sticking a Band-Aid on a deep wound doesn't help. You got to put stitches. You got to fix the actual problem. Whatever the case may be, right? If you fix the underneath problem, the surface problem will go away. If you fix the underneath problem, then you can put a couple of Band-Aids on the surface until the underneath problem is healed. That does help. But you got to fix the underneath problem first. So when you're looking for the solution, make sure you understand what the problem is. Don't solve the problem that's just going to come back up again. If you find that you've solved this problem over and over and over and over and over again, many, many times, that's a pretty good indication that this isn't the problem. There's something deeper.
Mhm.
So that's my thoughts on that. Is it a symptom? Well, that's pretty easy to see. Is there other related problems? Have you solved it over and over and over again? If that's the case, yeah, this is a symptom.
Mhm.
Look for the problem. And as you said, we have to go deep sometimes. Sometimes whatever's underneath the problem isn't the actual problem either. That's just a deeper symptom. And you have to go deeper and you have to go deeper. And sometimes we have to solve the surface problem before we can even see what the problem is underneath. So do what you have to do. And again, we've talked about these kinds of things on this channel many, many times. And we're going to be addressing this. We're going to do more of these problems and symptoms kinds of scenarios over the coming weeks to give you some idea of what this all looks like. We're going to go over a few specific scenarios. And if you have one you want us to go over, let us know. We'd be happy to go over specific scenarios that you bring up.
Mhm.
These are conversations. This is a new kind of direction we're going to go. We don't know how long we're going to go that way. We might pivot someday in the future, but this is for now where we're going. And I think it can be really, really helpful to help you, our audience, to really understand how to fix some of the stuff going on in your life. Is it the solution, or is it the symptom, or is it the problem? And if it's the symptom, what's the problem? Because as we've discussed, there could be very many problems. It isn't there's one possibility. There's many options. So how do you figure out what the problem is? Right?
Yeah.
And that's the question. Ask yourself what's going on underneath.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. This was really exactly how I had hoped it would go.
Right, me too.
I really, really feel like, you know, when we can start really unpacking problems and symptoms, or a problem could feel like a problem to someone, but it could be actually a symptom could really feel like a symptom to someone, but it's actually the problem. Like, I mean, we just don't know. And I think it's just really up to you to determine where you're at. It's not about
Yeah.
what we're saying is the right way. There's not, and I want you to understand there's really no like right or wrong. It's more about like unpacking who you are and your relationships, and sometimes going that little bit deeper. In how, like, one of the ways, like as I said, I like to really go deep with my clients is having them really go back through their life, like who they are,
Yes.
how they grew up, because I want them to know. Getting to know themselves will teach you then to start looking for the habits that you've formed, to see your patterns of how you typically respond to things like this, where he or she doesn't prioritize what I want. And being able to look at it from a different lens. That's what our hope is for you. And as the weeks go on, we're going to be, as Andy has said, we're going to be unpacking a few different things, because we just feel like this is something that should be talked about on a deeper level to get your brain working, right? Just get your
Yeah.
brain working. It doesn't have to be what we are telling you is the truth. It's we want you to think about it so that you can discern your own, what works
Right.
for you, what's not working for you, why, asking yourself questions. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is that when you are looking into trying to figure things out, It's really actually the questions that are going to help you. And the questions that are going to help you is, first of all, is it really a problem or is it a symptom? And then finding out why you believe that, because that will help you then to start asking more questions. I think the questions, and whatever questions are right for you. So it doesn't mean that there's like questions that are right. It means whatever questions are right for you. So thank you so much for joining us today, whether you joined live or you're watching it back. I truly appreciate you. Andy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Back at you. I love these conversations. And yes, thank you everybody for watching. Obviously, like and subscribe, do all the YouTube things that YouTube likes you to do, so that these videos get noticed by more people. If you know somebody who could benefit from this, share it to them. Send this to them. And of course, as always, if there is something that you'd like us to talk about, a problem or a symptom or any other topic really that you'd like us to talk about, drop us a line. Send it in a comment in one of our videos, or send us an email. We have contact information in our about page. You can contact us directly. Let us know. We'd like to have discussions that are relevant for you also. We also believe that some of these are. Hopefully they are. If they are, let us know. We'd like to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. And thank you, Leslie, for such a wonderful conversation.
Right back at you. So on that note, I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. It's the weekend. So I hope you have some amazing plans to spend time with your family, your loved ones, your friends, whatever that is. Get some self-care in there as well. And we will see you again next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.